corner as she peered anxiously at her. Reflection, the princess gasped aloud in shock. She barely recognized herself. The plague's vicious fever had tormented her body for so many days that her skin now looked fresher and suppler than on could ever remember turning in profile. She found with joy, but most incredibly, as Odor lifted her arm hesitantly to her nose for a sniff, she discovered not a hint of her chronic lifelong body odor lingered anymore. The prolonged feverish sweating must have somehow purged the smell entirely from her pores. Princess Adanne let out an ecstatic laugh, twirling experimentally while inhaling her now sweet-scented skin in delighted disbelief. This wonderful cure was like a miracle. Words couldn't express her euphoria to finally be free of the odor that had plagued and isolated her since childhood. Nearly weeping in her happiness, Adanne rushed excitedly to share the glorious news with her parents, the king and queen. She wanted everyone to know immediately that the infection, which had nearly killed her, had instead brought astonishing new confidence and joy into her life. After many more months, finally the rampant plague began dying away, and the strict quarantines on the villages could be lifted at last as Princess Adanne walked through the main gate of the castle for the first time in over a year. She held her breath nervously. She still remembered vividly the last time she had tried to join festivities in town, only to be met with the usual cruel recoils, whispered insults, and people pulling their children away to avoid her stench. But amazingly today no one shied from Adanne's approach. Villagers paused their revived marketplace battering to gaze in admiration as the princess floated by. Villagers paused their revived marketplace battering to gaze in admiration as the princess floated by. Ordor was startled to hear praises called out for her graceful bearing and glowing health. Some even cautiously stepped nearer, wide eyes drinking in her beauty, looking entranced in her presence. The local young men in particular couldn't seem to stop boldly watching the princess's every move, their mouths hanging half open with affection. For the first time she could recall, Adanne moved through her kingdom feeling strong, confident, and truly accepted. It seemed over the course of the plague's horrors, her cured odor and new uplifted confidence had transformed her into a village belle that no one could ignore. Princess Adanne was dizzy with the thrill of acceptance and admiration from villages she used to hide from, caught up in self-pride over her cured odor and newfound beauty. She had nearly forgotten her loyal love. Adanne, but walking through town she spotted a familiar figure bounding eagerly down the road towards her. It was Adanne, her dear friend, companion, and bridegroom-to-be, who she hadn't seen in over a year since the plague hit. Adanne's first eager impulse was to run straight into his arms with teary relief for his safety. But she caught herself short, doubts surfacing. Surely now she was too high above someone of common status like Adanne. She was a pampered royal, and he a drummer boy without notable wealth or family name to elevate him. Thoughts swirling into insecurely. The princess composed her face into a former distant mask before eyes could reach her. When he did, the drummer boy was grinning fit to burst. Desperate delight shone through us. He cried, "My princess, how I have missed basking in your beauty and radiance." He moved toward her as if expecting a warm embrace, but Adanne stood reserved and still, making no move to welcome him back after their long separation. Ordor joyfully stepped forward to hug Princess Adanne, so thankful to see his beloved betrothed again after agonizing months apart. But the princess recoiled sharply away from his opening arms. A look of deep surprise and hurt flashed across Ordor's face at her rejection. Confused, he searched her now cold eyes questioningly in sharp, cutting Tones not like her warm voice of old. Adanne stated that she no longer wished to continue their relationship. She told him that after enduring the plague's terrors and emerging more beautiful than ever, she now moved in different higher social realms than a common boy like Orin ever could. Heron looked deeply hurt by Adanne's harsh words, his anguish evident on his face. But Adanne, I love you, he protested passionately. These months of silence only made me love you more. I do anything to make you my wife, princess. Adanne met his gaze with a fiery glare. You will address me as Princess Adanne, she commanded coldly. This conversation ends here. I deserve someone better than you, she spat out the words, feeling a cruel satisfaction in them. Then, without a backward glance or a pause to listen to his heartbroken cries, she swiftly turned away, marching off with determination. She blocked out her inner anguish, shed shouts, her chin held high, popping her fancy clothes, and El Demino hid the pain she felt inside in Adanne's mind, cutting off their connection so abruptly closed that chapter of her life for good. Now she had plenty of noble suitors vying for her attention. In the following months, the increasingly vain princess continued with court life, acting as though the humble drummer boy Orini had never touched her heart. She entertained extravagant marriage proposals from respected lords and princes, one after another. These influential men had once turned away from Adanne in disgust, but now shamelessly they showered her with flattery, eager for the attention of the newly transformed princess. Adanne grinned as she soaked up their compliments about her flawless skin, graceful movements, and regal demeanor, praises that she could never have imagined receiving before. Despite the adoration, she couldn't shake the regret gnawing at her heart for pushing Orini away so harshly. As weeks passed, King Chukwu urged Princess Adanne to quickly choose a husband from the numerous suitors vying for her hand before rumors damaged her marriage prospects. Wanting all eyes on her, Adanne declared she would host a wrestling tournament where the kingdom's strongest men would compete for the chance to marry her. Upon hearing this, men of great strength traveled from far and wide, eager for the opportunity to win the hand of the renowned beauty. In the days leading up to the tournament, Adanne became obsessed with enhancing her appearance to outshine everyone. Her maids tirelessly groomed her, but in her pursuit of outer perfection, Adanne neglected basic cleanliness even for going regular baths. Slowly but surely, Adanne's old body odor returned on the morning of the wrestling tournament. The weather was perfect, providing an ideal backdrop to showcase Princess Adanne's beauty. She entered the bustling arena adorned in shimmering silks and adorned with jewels, aiming to dazzle the crowd. As Adanne lifted her delicate hand to wave at the cheering crowd, their excitement suddenly changed. A surprised whisper spread quickly among the people. They moved away in disgust, wrinkling their noses at the strong smell coming from the princess. Embarrassed men hid their faces, looking away to avoid eye contact. Princess Adanne felt deeply embarrassed when the tournament participants shook their heads and left, wanting to avoid her. The villagers watching the tournament also followed, talking quietly about her body odor and holding their noses in disgust. Adanne felt utterly crushed and ashamed. She quickly removed her fancy royal clothes and jewelry, dropping them in the dirt. With tears in her eyes, she turned and ran away as fast as she could. As Adanne ran, her eyes landed on one person standing alone across the tournament grounds, Prince Arinza. He stood tall and straight, looking at her with kindness as she hurried away. After a moment, Orin walked purposefully towards her, his face showing both concern and sadness for her distress. When Arinza reached Odor, he Spoke gently to her, my dear precious one. How could you think so little of our love and what we meant to each other? Why would you give up our bond for the fleeting attention of others? Tears rolled down Adanne's cheeks as she shook her head. Please forgive me, Orini. I made a terrible mistake thinking that looking beautiful on the outside was more important than our love. I was vain and careless, and now I've lost the most important thing in my life, your love and care. There was a small village surrounded by green hills and farms. Princess Odor lived in this little village. Her father was King Chokmeka, who ruled over the village. Adanne was the king's oldest daughter. She was known as a kind and gentle princess who treated the villagers well, but Adanne had a difficult issue she struggled with her whole life. She had very strong body odor that smelled quite bad. Even when Adanne was a young girl, she smelled much worse than the other children. The bad smell got worse as Adanne grew up. It was a pungent, unpleasant smell that trailed behind her wherever she walked. As Princess Adanne grew into a young woman, the people in the village started treating her differently. They tried to stay away from Adanne because of her very bad smell behind her back. Some villagers made unkind jokes and comments about how stinky the princess was. Some mothers with children would quickly pull their little ones inside their houses when they saw Adanne walking down the dusty village road. The young girls who used to be Adanne's friends would turn and go the opposite direction to avoid talking with her. This made Adanne very sad. There were many young men in the village and neighboring kingdoms who wished to court Adanne because she was pretty and the king's daughter. However, as soon as they got within 6 feet of her, they were driven away by her odor. They decided not to pursue her despite Adanne's beauty and royal title. This left the princess very lonely. She stopped leaving the palace most days. Princess Adanne would simply stay in her bedroom and gaze out her window, dreaming of true love and a man who could accept her smelly situation. She imagined a husband who would not care about her strong body odor but would love her for her kind heart. But it seemed impossible, and Adanne cried many tears over feeling so alone. It was a hot, vibrant summer day in the village. Princess Adanne was up in her castle bedroom fanning herself. She left her shutters open, hoping to catch a breeze. Then Adanne heard lively sounds floating up from the village square, joyous drum beating and people laughing. She leaned out her window and saw people dancing around a bonfire celebrating the summer feast day. Adanne felt a stirring of excitement. She thought maybe she could sneak out of the palace and observe the festivities without being noticed. People seemed so happy and distracted by the dancing, so Princess Adanne quietly left the palace and tiptoed to the edge of the village square for a few moments. No one realized she had joined them. Adanne stood in the shadows watching wistfully as girls her age spun fast in their colorful skirts, but soon a breeze blew, carrying Adanne's unfortunate odor through the crowd. People wrinkled their noses, glancing around to find the source of the stench. Then the drum beats and dancing halted as all eyes turned toward the lonely princess. Mouths fell open in shock before twisting into unpleasant sneer. People doubled over, gagging and whispered behind their hands while pointing at Adanne. The carefree joy of moments before had vanished. Adanne's eyes filled with humiliated tears. Adanne felt utterly embarrassed and ashamed after being ridiculed while dancing at a village gathering. With tears flooding her eyes, she ran away from the crowd and took cover behind some bushes to hide. She crouched down, trembling behind a tree, hoping no one would find her. But then she heard the distant steady beat of a drum growing louder and getting closer. Fearfully she peered through the leaves to see who was approaching to her. Surprised, it was a smiling young man from a neighboring village, cheerfully playing a hand drum as he walked directly toward her hiding spot. When he reached her, he stopped playing and kindly asked, "Why did you stop dancing back there? You looked so joyful and free while you were dancing." Adanne was stunned that this stranger had followed her all the way here, especially since he was able to detect her unusual scent. She replied incredulously, You can smell me, and yet you still came looking for me here. Everyone back in my village teases me and laughs at my dancing." The young man responded gently, "Don't worry about them. I think you're a wonderful dancer. Please ignore their unkind words and keep dancing with happiness and freedom." Adanne was surprised by the young man's kind words. She realized he truly didn't care about her differences. Comforted, she decided she would ignore the cruel taunts of her neighbors and dance freely just as she wished. The young man started playing a cheerful, upbeat rhythm on his hand drum. Adanne was unsure at first, but after a moment she began swaying lightly in time with the music. The stranger's smile grew even wider as he watched her start to move. He picked up the pace of his drumming, playing faster while keeping his eyes fixed warmly on Adanne's. Adanne could feel that he was truly seeing her, not just her outward appearance but her heart and soul. For the first time she could remember, she felt completely accepted. Just as she was, this realization freed her spirit. She let go of her self-consciousness and began dancing fluidly, her body unfurling into graceful motions that left her feeling breathless and